We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
This is Multipolarity, charting the rise of the new multipolar world order. Coming up this week.
As Pavel Durov remains in French hands, we're wondering whether Europe can finally develop its own Silicon Valley simply by mass detention of top entrepreneurial talent, or whether perhaps this is the desperate last whelp of a society increasingly bypassed by the global tech economy.
Meanwhile, in Germany, the story of the day is that the AfD has taken a great swathe of Thuringia and Saxony, while Sara Wagenknecht has gobbled the rest. This is democracy in action, so can it be stopped?
At the same time, the EU is redefining its central budget. For member states, that 1.2 trillion annual pocket money is no longer free. It will be conditional on economic reforms. We're about to find out what exactly Slovenia is prepared to do for its slice. Better yet, what will Hungary do?
Finally, as Turkey applies to be the latest BRIC, we're wondering, is this the point when it's quicker to build a new acronym from states who aren't in the club?
As you may have noticed, this week is an extended 4-story gutbuster of an episode.
But that's because it's a premium week, and we believe in giving our patrons a little extra on the side and round the back.
Of course, if you want to join the club, you too can sign up on Patreon to listen. £5, euros or dollars a month. Cancel any time.
But first,
the Silicon Archipelago. So last week, Pavel Durov, who is the CEO of Telegram, and until now quite a beloved figure in the West as kind of a libertarian radical who opposed the Putin regime, was arrested in an authoritarian police state known as ... France. He was arrested in Paris when he got off his private jet. And it was no minor arrest. It wasn't for parking tickets. The rumors were swirling that it was connected to a probe that had to do with all sorts of legal nasties, including human trafficking, child abuse material, drug trafficking, you name it. I mean, the worst of the worst crimes, really. And don't know Durov personally, but don't really think that's what tech billionaire creators are really getting up to. This is a huge story because this is highly unusual. I can't think of any other tech founder that's been treated in this way anywhere, really. I might be wrong about that. The only person that comes to mind is the founder of Silk Road, which was a drug trafficking network by a libertarian activist who went to jail in America, but that really was set up to traffic drugs, and I believe he was caught up in a homicide investigation. He tried to have somebody killed. That was genuinely a criminal enterprise. The Durov thing isn't, as anybody who has used Telegram will tell you. There's plenty to be said about this. He's now out on bail. Bail set above $5 million. The kink is that he is a French citizen. He took French citizenship. It was given to him by Emmanuel Macron on a fast-track basis for his libertarian rebel escapades against the authoritarian Putin regime that didn't actually arrest him. That was the French that arrested him. So the whole thing is completely bizarre. Emmanuel Macron has denied any knowledge Durov was going to be arrested when he arrived in Paris. I can say with almost 99% certainty that is not true. There is absolutely no way the French Justice Department went after such a high-profile figure without informing and agreeing with the president. A French satirical magazine, which publishes independent research and independent journalism and leaks as well, are passing around the rumor that they say has been leaked by insiders that Emmanuel Macron tricked Durov, that he said that he wanted a meeting with him, and Durov flew in and was subsequently arrested. Now, this isn't a completely discredited source. It is a satirical magazine, but it's kind of like Private Eye in Britain, if people know that. It does get genuine leaks, but it does, qualify in the rumor territory. And I would say that there's a ton of conspiracy theorizing going around about Durov, mainly among anti-Russian, pro-Ukrainian types who claim that Durov is some sort of a GRU agent or works for Russian intelligence. There's deep rumors going on. In the kind of rumor mill that is occurring, I wouldn't put too much stock in it. The real takeaway from all this is that the French are willing to go after such a high-profile figure in the tech world who really has not committed any crimes that I know of. The reason that they're going after him is, well, they haven't really said yet, but it's clearly about content moderation on his platform. The one thing I would say, it's kind of a rumor bouncing around that I think does have credibility to it, not because it's been leaked or anything like that, but because it makes sense. And that is that the French have convinced themselves, and the president of France has convinced himself, that the loss of the Sahel, those are the African colonies that France had until very recently, were driven by Telegram. This analysis has been bouncing around for a while. It's utter rubbish as far as I can tell. The Sahel was lost due to the rebels and the Russians having more military power than their opponents. This is how wars are actually won and lost. The kind of dum-dums in Western European capitals who spend all day on PowerPoint presentations love to convince themselves that images and text is what runs the world rather than, guns and bullets. I'm not surprised that they'd probably buy into something like that. It's been long known that Macron has been fuming about the loss of the Sahel. It's been a huge bruise to his ego. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's actually the underlying motivation here. Now, we can get back to whether this might be somewhat steered in a certain direction to tank the French economy further, because this is going to have an absolutely chilling effect on the technology sector in France. If I were an entrepreneur, I would be circumspect about traveling to France on holiday at this point. I mean, clearly that's sort of what Durov was doing, and he was arrested. So Emmanuel Macron wanted to turn France into a tech hub. He's turned it into a tech desert.
Yeah, I think this case is extremely interesting on a few levels. First of all, because the argument for arrest, or the case for arresting Mr. Durov is self-evidently preposterous, but secondly, because it gets at the heart of several issues surrounding the internet and social media at the moment. On the first issue, the case for arresting him, I know for a fact that there is some pretty ugly stuff on that. One of my main sources for the current conflict in Ukraine is Telegram, because the reporting in the legacy Western media, by which I mean the Telegraph and the Guardian, which are the two newspapers I read most frequently, has been awful. It's been quite shameful for journalists to produce such work. I've had to turn to alternative sources of information, find individuals who I believe are credible on places like X, formerly Twitter, and Telegram. In the process of that search on Telegram, I did see some really ugly, horrible channels, both on the Ukrainian and on the pro-Russian side, really, celebrating and reveling in horrible images that come out of war. War is, as we often forget, truly hell on earth, and the sort of imagery that it produces is reflective of that. There are also issues with drugs, drug trafficking, and drug dealing. However, we also know, or it's certainly alleged, and in some cases exposed, that, say, Facebook and Instagram and other social media have issues with producing and moderating such information as well. Some other social media websites have been accused, sometimes quite credibly, of harboring such content, and yet nobody is issuing arrest warrants for Mark Zuckerberg, for example. So I think it's ridiculous that they've singled out Telegram in particular for this. The other point is, of course, as you pointed out, Philip, shortly after the arrest happened last week, if France really disliked Telegram, they could have just shut it down in France. They could have just banned access to Telegram in France. But they didn't. They arrested Pavel Durov to coerce him to do their bidding while keeping the app open in France. This seems like a very strange way to do it. If indeed the problem is non-cooperation with moderating certain content, I think this gets to the heart of the matter. It's not the moderation of such content. Other social media platforms have been accused of such issues themselves, and also if France really had a problem with it, they could have shut it down. The problem is that France and the broader West does not control Telegram. It does control Meta, which is the parent company for Facebook and Instagram. As we have discovered recently, US state organizations, and no doubt other state organizations in the West, whether from the intelligence community or other organs of the state, have dipped into Facebook and Instagram and demanded certain points of view be censored, other points of view be promoted, the details and networks of certain individuals be revealed and passed across. And Meta has been okay with doing this. In fact, X, formerly Twitter, when it was Twitter before Elon Musk took it over, was also willing to do that, as we saw with the Twitter files, which was a long-standing investigative journalism effort by, I think, 3 journalists, one of whom was Matt Taibbi, for fame. They exposed exactly how involved both the US intelligence community and other organs of the US government were in regards to dipping in and out of Twitter to suppress certain stories, to have people banned, to shadow ban other people. That's not the case with Telegram. Like, it's a free-for-all. There is Ukrainian propaganda, there is pro-Western propaganda, but there's also Russian propaganda. There's honest reporting from Ukraine and honest reporting from Russia. There's honest reporting from the West. There's anti-Western reporting there as well. They can't put their fingers on the scale with Telegram. And I think this gets to the core of the problem, and it's also the core of the problem that people have with X, formerly Twitter, now that it's been taken over by Elon Musk. It's simply a case that they can no longer put their fingers on the scale. Social media is incredibly important in terms of shaping narrative, shaping public opinion, and importantly, shaping the political discourse. People want control of this. And I think this is the way that the world is increasingly going. Countries want a sovereign internet. They want to control what's on the internet and what information is disseminated in the same way that they used to control what went out through TV channels and newspapers. And there's a great battle at the moment. A country like China was very swift to establish a sovereign internet and was hugely criticized for doing so by Western countries. Russia has moved slowly and piecemeal, but still not quite as far as the Chinese, in the same direction, and has been hugely criticized for doing so. But now the West is doing it. And now the West is following exactly the same route. We saw the US insist that TikTok was either banned or be sold to American investors. Now we see France doing this with Twitter. We see a constant pressure campaign on X, formerly Twitter. And I think this is going to continue.
Yeah, I've no doubt that what you're saying is true, and I think that's part of the story. Clearly, Telegram and Durov are too off the leash for certain people's tastes, no doubt about that. But as you said, if they didn't like Telegram, they could ban it. Why did they arrest the guy? And this is where I think there's a few things going on here, a few moving parts. And this sort of suggested itself to me when I watched the media coverage that came out after the Durov arrest. In Europe and Britain, it was all talk about child trafficking, Russian influence on the app, and militaries using it to coordinate.
Hello, Andy Collingwood here, breaking the fourth wall to let you know that this is a premium episode of Multipolarity, the podcast. Patreons get exclusive access to these premium episodes. It costs only $5, pounds or euros per month. They can cancel any time, but judging by the feedback that we get, they actually really like it. We get some fantastic emails and messages, direct messages on Twitter and Patreon as well. This week, we'll be talking further about Pavel Durov. We'll be talking about the budget disaster and long-term economic problems that the European Union is building up for itself. We'll be discussing Germany and how the populists have broken the firewall that the political establishment had built for them, and also some of the long-term prospects for Germany and the broader EU. And finally, we'll be talking about why this was such a big week for the BRICs. So, if you would like to hear this, if you would like to hear our entire back catalogue, if you would like to interact with us a little bit more, go to patreon.com, Multipolarity the podcast, and sign up. As I said, people seem to be very happy with it, but if you do want to cancel for whatever reason, you can do so. Now, back to the show.